This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and joining me from North London is Japanese coach Eddie Jones. Eddie Jones, a couple of weeks ago, I asked you about the Rugby Championship and what you'd learnt, and your number one message out of what you'd learnt from the Rugby Championship was the depth of the South African Rugby Union squad, and certainly when they announced their team for the game against Japan on Sunday, it reeks of that depth. When you saw the team that they announced, what was your first reaction?
Look, you always hope, when you're coaching a team like Japan, when they're about to announce the team, you always hope they put their strongest team out because you want to play against the best. So I was pleased that they've, gone close to full strength, if not full strength. Because we want to test ourselves. We know there's a big gap between where we are and where they are, and we know it's an enormous challenge for us to play at our best against a team like that. So I was really pleased with it, mate.
So when you sat down and had your first conversations with Gary Gold and you looked at the different choices that Rassie had made, Kirtley, Aronsa, Franco Mostert and Lou De Jager coming back after injury and other reasons not there, the young prop Zachary Porthen being given an opportunity, Andre Esterhausen on the back providing some hybrid sort of coverage there. What was your analysis with the other coaches when you saw the team?
Look, it's South Africa's much for muchness, mate. They've been, when they win, they're very consistent. They kick and they play off the back of winning the kicks. And they're going to be physical and they're going to have narrow line speed and they're going to try to take away all the time and space away from us. So, there's only little nuances. Maybe they might shift the ball a little bit more, with Sasha and Lebok both at covering the 10 position. But, I think South Africa want to play to their best, and they play to their best when they play their normal DNA, and we've only seen them really go away from that once. And they were caught by that, and I don't think we'll see them go too far away from it again in the near future.
But do you think that with Tony Brown playing the role that he does inside the South African coaching staff, that is an ambition for South Africa to be able to play more than just the traditional way that they play?
Well, I think their ambition is to win, mate. Like, very clearly their ambition is to win. Anything it takes to win. Rassie knows that, like any team in the world, you don't just want to have a plan A. You want to have a game you can adapt to any situation. You can adjust your game to any situation. And I think they're going through that period where they're working out what their best adjustments to their game is.
What do you think of the selection of the young prop, Porthen, Zachary Porthen? Do you know much about him?
Not a hell of a lot, mate. But if you're a batsman, you don't want to play your first test against the West Indies when they had 4 pace bowlers. As a tight end, as a perceived scrummaging game, it'd be one of the less taxing games. But it's an area we think we can put a little bit of pressure on South Africa.
So, what is the weather forecast for Sunday's match?
I always remember, mate, asking the groundkeeper at Wellington I think it was about 2001, what's the weather going to be tomorrow? And he said, hey, mate, it's winter here. It's going to rain. So the forecast in London, London, November, it might say 3% chance of rain, but the chances of rain are always very high. It came in, it was like it'd never been away, grey skies, drizzle. Heavy traffic on the M25, everything was the same.
So when you came in with your Japanese team, how well did the team travel and how well have they recovered from what was a pretty difficult and hard match against Australia in what were pretty trying conditions in Tokyo, where, as you said on the program earlier this week, the team did a lot more tackling than they would normally have done in a typical test match?
Yeah, well, we've been here less than 12 hours, mate. We won't know how the boys are and how they sleep until a couple of hours later this morning. We're going to have a late run out at out at Saracens about mid-lunchtime. Then the boys will go for a bit of lunch in at St Albans, which is close by. And tomorrow morning we'll see how they are.
Okay. But they travelled in good spirits when they assembled in Tokyo for the flight. What was your observation of how they had recovered and how they were engaging with each other at that time?
Well, I think, one of the great things about coaching a young team, and for a lot of these guys, it's not only their first rugby tour to Europe, it's their first time ever in Europe. They've never been in Europe before. So it's fantastic, exciting. And when you're a young bloke, and, the top 23 travel business class, because we normally travel economy class, because budgets have tightened up for most teams around the world now. So, for those 23 boys travelling business, your first trip to Europe in business class, it's like having Christmas for 16 hours.
Watching the beds and going up and down and hitting all the buttons and having a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's right, mate. So, they're in good spirits. As I said, we know it's an enormous challenge for us, but we've just made a commitment of not having any excuses. Obviously, been a quite enduring week in terms of, playing Australia, then basically getting on a plane and flying over to London. But we just want to get out there and put our best foot forward and see how far we can take South Africa. We know, like the old rumble in the jungle. Couldn't believe, Pemby, that rumble in the jungle was 50 years ago, hey? 50 years ago.
Oh,
amazing,
is that right?
Isn't it? Yeah.
Oh.
And the great story.
Where did you pick that news up from?
Oh, we were just talking about it the other day as coaches. And, because the analogy of us against South Africa, we just got to absorb the punishment, hang in there long enough, and maybe we get a chance to win the game, and we've got to win it, and that's what it's going to be like. It's like, Muhammad Ali against George Foreman, they got all the heavyweight punches, they got all the power, and we just got to hang in there, loosen the ropes, swing, duck, don't get hit, give them nothing to hit early and see how we go.
So in terms then of your preparation over the last couple of weeks, you're preparing for the Australian game and what the challenge of Australia was, but did you get time during that preparation to think about South Africa and think about what you were going to have to do to neutralise the threat of South Africa?
Oh, look, Australia takes up most of your time, mate, but the coaches from the Thursday of the Australian week starting to have a look and start to have a chat about South Africa, and what adjustments we can make to our game to take away their strengths and play to our strengths. So, that started on Thursday. Obviously, then after the game, it intensifies a fair bit. Sunday, we had some chats on it. Then Monday, we had a light training run to go over it, and then Tuesday we trained pretty well actually. So we've had two good training days. Again, as I said, we'll have a light training day today, and then our the normal captain's run on Friday. So we'll have enough preparation, and we'll feel like we've done all our homework, or done as much homework as we can.
So we were discussing it earlier in the week in terms of injuries. So you lost the second choice hooker, lost the 12. Did you lose any other players before you left Tokyo?
A young utility bloke who came in strained his hamstring, so he'll stay behind for a week or so. And one of our Fijian locks, because of the strict nature of visas these days, can't get into the UK until a week later, so he'll be available for the Island game. And then we've got Naoto Saito, who's playing for Toulouse, is unavailable because of Regulation 9.
Yeah, okay.
Which again, I reckon is a moot point about international rugby. We need to have international windows. Like, there needs to be an international window, and you can see how much international rugby there is this weekend. We need that window extended. Common sense says that every top country in the world plays around 15 tests now, right? So that takes you about 22 weeks, doesn't it? Around 22 weeks you need for international rugby.
Yep.
That leaves you 30 weeks for domestic rugby. So say if you take 6 weeks out for players' rest and recuperation, that leaves you 24 weeks for domestic rugby. 24 weeks means you should have 10 team comps around the world, home and away, semi-final, final, and there's your season. Yeah, at some stage in the near future, the game's got to be professional enough to go to that, and there has to be alignment of the competitions around the world to have the most fruitful and most productive and most effective, and I would dare say the most economic rugby season in the world. At some stage, sense has got to come in that.
Yeah, it's hard to think about that, isn't it, though? Because, self-interest, as the Australian Prime Minister always used to say, Paul Keating, always back self-interest because it's trying. And in any of those negotiations, trying to unpick, those positions for people to be able to concede or, to believe that if they do concede that there is something on the other side, because there's, World Rugby doesn't have the control that someone like a FIFA does to be able to mandate the change. But yeah, certainly it's worthy of ongoing debate and discussion, and perhaps we can continue to keep it there as a discussion point over the next little while, because as you say, this weekend, the fact that people and teams are playing for world ranking points, and they're not evenly matched because of the availability of players, that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. I would have thought only points should be allocated inside the windows, but that's another consideration as well. So listen, just from a personal point of view, from your point of view, obviously you spent a lot of time, as you say, coaching in the Northern Hemisphere, and coaching there at England, and flying back in, as you say, it's grey, it's drizzly. It is this November window. What sort of feelings do you have about it all? Obviously, you've got your mind on coaching Japan, but as a rugby person, this November period where there is so much rugby being played, not just this weekend, there's more rugby being played next weekend, and it sort of grows over the month. It really is a great celebration and a great time of the game. But from a personal reflection, what do you sort of think about it at all, or are you just so busy thinking about Japan that you're just straight on, to the job?
Oh no, I think like one of the great things about being in the UK, there's a lot of people involved in top level sport, and it's easily accessible. Like last night, I caught up with Gordon Fairley Hamilton, as you know, from I don't know the name of their company now, but they were the instigators.
Sporting Insights.
Yeah, they were the instigators of data analytics in rugby. They started the ball rolling, and now become a prolific supplier of data around the world for various teams and align with various people. And we were talking about coming to England, you're able to meet those people quite easily, whereas when you're in Japan and even in Australia, they're not people you can catch up with easily, and the UK affords you all those opportunities. So, it's a great sporting place to be. You've got obviously the football drama on. We've seen Ange over the last period get sacked. Now he's in the running for Celtic. So it's nice to be in that sort of that I don't know what you call it. It's like a real beehive of it's buzzing, sports going on. Yeah. People come up to you, you're playing against South Africa this week. A lot of people come up and talk about rugby to you, which again you don't get in Japan.
Yeah. But London is really the capital of the rugby world, isn't it?
Well, I don't know whether it's capital of the rugby world. It's capital. I would say it's capital of sporting endeavour. A lot of what seems to go on, particularly around the business of sport, happens in London. And there's a lot of knowledge here about all the comings and goings of sport and particularly rugby. Because London, we know, is completely dominated by football. But, rugby has a strong place in it, a strong place in the sporting environment here.
So who else are you planning to catch up with over the next little while? Who have you got in your little black book? So you never miss an opportunity to catch up with people. So who's on the list?
Well, time's of the essence at the moment. We've just come in, so I haven't got too much prepared at the moment, but I might pick up a few people along the way.
Yeah. No, I'm sure you will. I'm sure you'll be having plenty of conversations as the days go by. So certainly, when do you name your team for Sunday?
I will name it UK time later this afternoon. So we've gone to announcing our team internally on the Monday, and I've been pleased that team hasn't been leaked to the media, which is a good sign that the team can keep confidence, staff and players, because staff can leak it as well. So that's a good sign for us. But we've got our best 23 picked. It's going to be a rare occurrence for these players to play at Wembley. One of the most iconic stadiums in the world. When you think about some of the great games of sport that's been played there, it's going to be a real honour for these players to play. And I don't think some of the young Japanese players don't have a real feeling of what Wembley's like. But we'll train there tomorrow, and I'm sure they'll get a better feeling of it then.
Yeah. Any indication of how many you might get there on Sunday?
Well, I know they've been hitting the social media pretty hard, South Africa, because South Africa's home game. And you've got England, Australia on it at Twickenham, and apparently they haven't sold that out from all reports.
Oh,
so
really?
And Gordon was mentioning this last night. He was saying that because the premiership clubs now have their big day out, which they normally have at Twickenham, and people can only have so many big days out, because the cost of a ticket at Twickenham is high, that there's a pressure point coming in terms of pricing at Twickenham. So at this stage, it hasn't been sold out, which is unusual.
Yeah, but would you? Are they? I know they might be hitting it hard, but have they mentioned a number like a 30 or a 40,000?
I think they're hoping to get 40,000. I think ticket sales probably indicate around that.
Okay,
which would be a pretty good result.
Yep. All right. Oh, that'd be a fabulous result and a wonderful occasion, and best of luck with the naming of your side and the rest of your preparation. But we will go to the third voice, as we always do, because there are some questions and many comments. But first out from the comments, Robert Abuya on YouTube says, Eddie is so generous with his time and frank with his answers. Thank him for us. Eddie Jones, consider yourself thanked. Mark Coops from Spotify, loving the analysis and recommendations for the future of rugby union. Well done, gents. Keep up the good work. Galaxy M on YouTube, a few more balls go to hand and Japan wins that one. Well done, Eddie, on a fantastic performance. I'm sensing another big upset coming soon from this young Japanese team. Gary Emery says, hi, David. Thanks for uploading another edition of the podcast. Your, Eddie's and Ewan's comments always provide detailed, unbiased analysis as to how the game can continue to develop. Good luck to the Wallabies in the forthcoming matches in Europe. So thanks, everyone, for those comments. But Charlie Mondelli on YouTube asks a question. Great episode as always, Pemby. I noticed in recent games that Eddie likes to use loose forwards in positions traditionally covered by backs, such as roaming behind the ruck to catch high balls and carrying in the wide channels. I know Eddie has long been a proponent of the hybrid player, but curious to hear his views on what role they might play in the current game. Cheers. So, Eddie Jones, this notion of hybrid players is out and about once again. You probably started it, or you did start it years ago when your discussions about Jack Noel, and this time around we have Steve Borthwick talking about Ben Earl, who will play at some time for England at 12. Henry Pollock will play at some time on the wing. And this week for South Africa, our Andre Esterhuizen providing some cover for the loose forwards. So Charlie's question is about the hybrid player, and perhaps before then, that tactic of using, particularly last week, Leach was in that position of floating back to pick up those balls. How are you thinking about that particular role, and how are you thinking about the emergence and development of hybrid players?
Yeah, well, I think it's more about using the player's strengths. I can remember way back in 2018, I think it was 2018, we played against South Africa and we used Ellis Genge for England, to carry the ball back because they were at that stage kicking a lot more long balls. And so we put Genge in the backfield to use his strength as a ball runner. So you're just trying to find ways to maximise the strength of your players. But also the other thing that's come in, because kicks are now, there's so many more contestable kicks. And it's one of the most interesting questions for World Rugby. Are they happy taking the escort game out of the game, escorting out of the game and increasing the number of contest kicks? So do they want more kicks in the game? Like, that's the first question. Do they want more kicks in the game? Yeah, and generally the answer to that, everyone will say no. Because rugby's supposed to be a running game. But in fact, taking escorts out of the game has brought more contest kicks in the game. So do we want that in the game? Yeah, that's an answer for World Rugby to answer. And they should be discussing that. It would be interesting if you could get into World Rugby in the sanctum whether they are discussing that. So and now the contest kicks. So if you look at the two lines of defence, the front line and the back line, now a lot of teams are kicking in between the space. So it used to be you kick the ball 18 metres, the box kick would be 18 metres optimum, where you could kick and run and contest the ball. And now teams are using more of a 10, 12, 15 metre kick, which then is in between the two lines. So it makes sense having a catcher between those two lines now. So the use of a loose forward there seems to make sense. But there'll be eventually some teams will find a way to break that down, and there'll be a new evolution of the game. So these little nuances of the game keep developing and keep coming. And the hybrid player, well, I think you want players who can play a number of positions, particularly with HIA now. I think HIA has exacerbated the fact you need players who can play a number of positions because, at the start of a game you can lose, as Australia did. At the start of a game you could lose two locks. Yeah. I think one of them was HIA. I don't think both of them were HIA. But then you've got to find players who can cover. Yeah, you can cover multiple positions. And that's really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about those particular experiments that Steve Borthwick's talking about? Ben Earl at 12, Pollock on the wing. Do you think that they've got the qualities? Esterhausen being able to cover loose forward as well as centre. Those particular examples, do you think they are good examples of emerging hybrid players to be able to cover multiple positions? Because traditionally, I suppose, people would talk about coverage of, can play 10, 12 or 15, or at a pinch could play 12, 13 or 12, 13, 15. That was more, that notion of flexibility, whereas now we're talking about, forwards playing in the backs, which is a development, I suppose, in the way that we think about how players are used and the way their skills are developed and the way coaches are thinking about developing those types of players.
Well, I think the first question you got to ask is, have they got the athleticism to do it? So there's a certain amount of, for forwards, there's a certain amount of speed and acceleration you need in the backs. And I would dare say Ben Earl would be probably the quickest player over 10 metres for England. So there's no reason why he can't play 12. He's got a good running game. His passing game, from what I've seen, is okay. But 12's passing now is almost a rarity in the game. How many times you see the ball go from 10 to 12 to 13? It's a rarity in the game. It generally goes through a forward's hands first. So there's no reason why he can't play that role. Pollock's obviously athletic. He's fast. He's tall. He's got long blonde hair, so that always looks good when you run down the wing. You like a winger with long hair. They capture the crowd's imagination. So he's got that going for him. At Twickenham, he'll be a big hit, mate.
Yeah, no, indeed he will. So there's, as you say, plenty of rugby this weekend, and Ben Earl and Henry Pollock will be playing for England. They have selected their side. George Ford was selected ahead of Finn Smith, who's on the bench. Baxter and Hayes to start as props with Genge and Stewart on the bench. Pepper and Underhill, open side and blind side flankers. Again, Tom Curry on the bench, and Tommy Freeman at centre for England. When you saw Steve Borthwick's team, what were your thoughts? And the Australian team, as we are discussing, has not yet been selected. But any surprises there, or given that the Lions boys have been, it's not long since they've been back in circulation, that this is a pretty straight up selection from Steve Borthwick, and rewarding performance really from the Argentinians tour, where England did play very well.
I think there's probably three factors there, mate. Firstly, as you mentioned, the form of players in Argentina. George Ford was outstanding there, and has maybe got the rub. The form of the Lions players, they've had a slow start to the season. I'm not acutely aware of how each of those players have been playing, but I heard that, Finn Smith's been a bit muddled at Northampton, hasn't got off the season so well. And for a young guy, on the back of his first international season, culminating in the Lions tour, that would be understandable. I think also the third factor is for Steve. He's acutely aware of the noise that can be caused by losing a game at Twickenham. So he's won 7 games in a row. Everything's going well. So bringing George Ford in for the first test, maybe he thinks with George there he can control the game through his kicking. George, the evolution of George, I think, is the fact that, and Gordon and I were talking about it last night, is that now he's a more mature player. He doesn't get seduced by the scoreboard, so he keeps doing the things that helps teams win games, whereas younger tens, can sometimes think they've got to chase the game, start taking risks that really isn't warranted in terms of winning the game. And, I think that's one of the reasons why George is probably playing in this first test against Australia. And, as we said, he was in great form against Argentina. He's probably in one of the best patches of his career, and Finn Smith will play off the bench. Yeah. Probably the surprising selection is Marcus Smith not being in the 23. And if you look at his career, he came through like a meteor. He was going to be the next best thing in English rugby. Looked like, and the media clamouring for him was, almost to the absurd. And now, it's starting to flatten out a bit. And I think the challenge for Marcus now is really to find the game where he can be effective at international rugby. And I probably look at him a bit like Richie Mwanga. It took Richie a long time to be successful at international rugby. He was one of those all-action attacking 10, and then he developed a really strong, solid attacking kicking game, has got a good enough long kicking game. Defensively he was enormously robust, and that's Marcus' challenge now, is to find that and win the trust of the England coaches, because he's such a talented player. But as we know, talent only gets you so far, then applying that talent, particularly at Test rugby at number 10.
But it is interesting you mentioned that about George Ford at whatever age he is now. What's he now, 34, 35, or maybe even a bit older than that now?
Yeah, no, he'd have to be close to 33, 34. I think he'd be closer to 34 than anything. But he's, players, I think, they start off, most players start off when they're young. They're essentially, they play for themselves because they need to prove themselves. Then they go through a middle period of their career where they become really strong team players. They know their place in the team. And then sometimes at the end, when they're clinging on, they start to play for themselves a bit more. And I think, for George, he's really at the end of his career become such a strong team man. Plays strongly for the team. And so, he's aged really well as a player.
So listen, just before I let you go, any other insights from Gordon Hamilton Fairley? Any other sort of parts of your conversation last night about rugby or about individual players that you'd like to share with us? Because certainly, as you say, Gordon Hamilton Fairley knows the data. He knows the facts. He knows he can see the future.
No, most of the data now, everyone's got the winning metrics, kick more, run more, have less rucks, have less turnovers. Everyone knows that. But the big thing now is how you can measure work off the ball. It's work off the ball, and you know what in Japan is called biso, just in case running. Like, is such a massive part of the game now. You know, the players who are prepared to just in case run. There's a kick goes over your head, quick line out. You know, have you got 3 or 4 back who can attack, or only got 1 or 2 and 2 players just saunter back? You know, if you think about the great All Black teams, whenever they had a quick line out, you see 4 backs across the field, and they could shift the ball to the other side of the field as quickly as you can see, and then they'd be on, and then they'd be attacking. So, that the ability to measure that effectively now is where it's all going. Aligning the GPS with the data, having better information about work off the ball, and all of that is a long way behind football at the moment, soccer at the moment, but rugby's starting to catch up, and that'll be the next evolution of where the sort of data analytics goes.
Very good. All right, Eddie Jones, you are a busy man, and I'm very grateful, and I know the audience is very grateful that you would give us your time during a test week, and it is always so it's wonderful to be able to share this time with you ahead of such big and important games. So I know you're going to leave your computer on so it all uploads so we can get it through to the audience when we make the program. Eddie Jones has a habit of leaving the room very quickly and as he moves on to the next thing. So actually, what is the next thing? What are you up to next? What's on the agenda?
No, off to the gym next, mate. Quick workout, and then we're in a series of meetings.
Okay, off to the gym. Very good. All right. Well, listen, have a great day. Thanks again for joining us. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Eddie Jones in a test week. It's great, isn't it, that he gives up his time for you, the audience, so that he can help take you on the journey of what it's like to be a test. And you can see, that South African side that has been selected. That is Ewen McKenzie actually sent Eddie and I an email yesterday after the South African team was named saying respect. He just put the team there and then the word respect next to it, which is, I think, a great moment for the Japanese team that they know that they are about to face, close to full strength Springboks side. So anyway, coming up after the break, Ewen McKenzie will join us and we will discuss everything about a wonderful weekend of rugby ahead of us where the Barbarians take on the New Zealand 15, South Africa takes on Japan, England takes on Australia, Munster against Argentina A, Scotland will play against the USA, and in Chicago, Ireland play New Zealand, and in the Rugby Europe Trophy, Croatia, 41st in the world, measure up against Denmark in Makarska, which is on the Dalmatian coast, and Sweden will take on Lithuania in Trelleborg in Sweden. So plenty of rugby across Europe this weekend. Lots to look forward to. But coming up next, our discussion with the great Ewen McKenzie. So, Ewen McKenzie, the Australian team has been selected. Your thoughts?
I guess for me, the only surprise is Bell coming back in. I shouldn't be surprised because I've been an advocate of his for some time. I don't think he's been getting enough minutes. So that'll be a test at scrum time, but he's an excellent player. And so if you look at the two teams, I'll talk about England in a minute, but I think him coming in gives a bit of dynamism there in terms of ball carry, and then you've got Tupu. So the scrum should be good. I think the rest of it's pretty predictable. I think the selection's based on the people that aren't available and whatever. I don't think there's any sort of left field stuff going on there. And the bench looks pretty interesting as well from an impact perspective. You got some good players there coming into the game. So, yeah, I think probably what I expected. Bell was the only surprise.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And why do you think he's done that? Do you think Bell's earned the right, having spent most of the year coming off the bench?
Well, I think obviously, Slipper retiring, they've been relying on him. He's not around anymore, so I think it's sort of like a chance for him to own the spot. He's been doing good work when he got the opportunity. In fact, I think, we've been getting 20 minutes of good work out of him, but I think he's capable of a lot more than that in terms of the game dynamics. So I think he actually adds a bit of X factor. So that'll be. So I think it's more of a function of the people ahead of him have changed. So that's what's. If you look at all the changes in the team, it's all because someone else has gone to play in Europe or retired. So that's pretty much what's happening. So no surprises. You're pretty conservative selections all around, I think, and then. Yeah, you got a few guys coming off the bench that were sort of rewarded from the last couple of games, the Japan A game and also the Japan Test. So Stewart's still there, CDC's still there on the bench. Lucan didn't get much time in the last Test. He's there, so he's come back from injury. Must be getting a jab or something to play. Then Alatara, Robinson, they're good players for the second half. I think it's the right order for the front row. The second row has been, Frost and Williams have been they've played a lot of Test football together, so there's a fair bit of combination in everything they've picked.
Your man Tizano didn't make the bench?
Yeah, I think that was forecast during the week. He's been such a good player, but you've got two really good players there, so to not make the bench. England's gone for 6-2 on the bench, so Australia hasn't, so he's missed out that way.
And your thoughts on the England side, the six Lions who are on the bench, starting with Baxter and Hayes up front, Underhill and Pepper as the flankers.
What he seems to have done is just taken his touring squad that went to Argentina and did well, and he's because they're on a short preparation, I think he's sort of sticking with the guys he worked with last, and he's got all the Lions guys lined up on the bench to add impact in the second half, which is when Australia's been traditionally good this year, the second half. So I think the matchup in the second half's another game in a way. But that said, I had a look into Hayes and Baxter, and we've seen Baxter before. Hayes I didn't know about, but he got the player of the tour in Argentina, which is unusual for a tight end prop. So I'm keen to see how he goes. But he got a lot of fan support. So that's one thing. But having Stewart and Genge coming off the bench, they're both very capable ball carriers. So having that impact coming into the game from your front row is good. Pollock, we know, Finn Smith, those sort of guys. So they've got a lot coming into the game later. So I would expect to see them coming in with 30 to go. He'll be using his bench on a 6-2. A lot of those forwards will be on the field early. So I think it's more of a reward and a nod to the cohesion they might have had in Argentina and a short preparation. They've just sort of kept continuity with some of the combinations and then just going to inject the Lions guys later in the game, which makes sense to me.
Interestingly, the Telegraph is reporting that Steve Borthwick turned up with his laptop to the hotel where the referee was and sat down with Nika Amishkeli and showed him a number of clips of the issue that we've been discussing for a few weeks now around the clean-out and the entry of the clean-out from, the disappearance of the gate and whether or not, almost at a 90-degree angle sometimes. And they've actually, the Telegraph has got a hold of these particular clips. Never know how they were able to do that. But what are your thoughts about that?
Must have hacked his computer. Yeah.
What about that?
Well, have
you done that in the past?
Have
you turned up with? Yeah.
I don't know if I've turned up with a laptop, but I've definitely turned up with very specific points to be made and references. The laptop's going right back through Super Rugby and whatever. I remember every time you go to to play the Crusaders in Christchurch, they'd turn up at the hotel and they'd all be there, Richie McCaw, the whole lot, laptops, the whole lot. So, there's always been the capacity to not influence, but demonstrate the referee things that are right and wrong in the game. We've been talking about the angle of entry into rucks and things like that as a broad issue. And what happens is, if no one deals with it, you're going to get a more focused effort by the coaches, because it's frustrating if you're seeing parts of the game that just don't get administered in law. So it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't worry me. Australia could do the same and could well have done the same. Now, the only difference is they didn't leak it to the Telegraph.
But it's interesting when you do watch them as they're presented sort of one after the other. It creates this sort of sense of, oh, well, okay, this is happening quite a lot. And some of them are egregious, examples of, really coming almost at a 90-degree angle to knock people out of the way. So,
no, I've seen it across the test. But you've got to be careful what you wish for. If you ask him to administer it, it works for both sides. So they're going to make sure they're squeaky clean themselves. Yeah. I think it's a slippage in the game from a lot of teams, and so that's why we were talking about World Rugby clarifying the situation regarding the gate.
Yeah. Yes. Well. And I don't think we're going to get that opportunity anytime soon. It certainly won't be this month to be able to get that representative from World Rugby as promised. But certainly outside of competition, we will continue to raise the questions as we...
The message will go back. I mean, the fact that it's in the Telegraph is going to tell the refereeing community that this is going on. The referee probably will talk up the line in his reviews and whatever, saying, that the English team presented this information. I suspect it's been not a source of frustration, but it's an aspect of the game that everyone knows has been left to wither on the vine, and I think it's about time they started to look at it again.
And so... to the actual match itself, Twickenham speaking with Eddie Jones earlier on the program. Damp, sort of overcast. It's London in November. How do you see the match progressing and evolving?
Oh, I think with forward at 10, I think it's going to be he'll be looking for a precise kicking game, and they've got a very tall bunch of backs, outside backs. So I think that they'll be looking to put some pressure on the air. Australia's picked with their selections. They've tried to pick a side that can hopefully deal with that. Potter on the wing in particular. So I think that's how England will play. They'll be quite conservative and quite pinpoint, using the boot early in the game, and they've got a bit of capacity to open the game up in the second half with all those Lions players coming in. So they might need to shift the game or stick with it, whichever's working.
Yeah.
From an Australian point of view, it's probably the bigger question, because they've been relying on this, this piston style forward attack and then trying to use the back line. That's now been well thumbed and watched and whatever. So the question is whether they've got more in terms of first phase backline attack and the like, because we haven't seen a lot of that. It's really just been opportunistic play off 6th, 7th phase, where a Jorgensen or someone will make some sort of X factor break. So I'm keen to see if Australia's got more structure on their first phase, and whether they kick or run. I don't think the conditions will be wet, but I think the teams handle that all right. The ground will be in fantastic condition, so there's nothing in play there. So, it's going to be contrasting styles, I suspect. Oh, I hope, but Australia could well just play what they've been trying to do because it's easy for them. But whether they're effective at that, I don't know. We'll see.
So in terms then of also the contrasting preparations, Steve Borthwick made the point that, Australia's been together since before the Lions series, and they've had the benefit of the Rugby Championship, and they've been together and had all the benefit of that time together. Conversely, Joe Schmidt is pointing out the fact that, England are fresh. Yes, they've only had, Steve Borthwick saying we've only had 4 times together. Joe Schmidt saying, well, that's 2 more than we've had this week. How do you think about those contrasting preparations going into a match like this, and how do they impact the game?
Well, I think Borthwick's tried to extend his Argentina preparation sort of, and tried to sort of continue that on based on the fact that he's got he had the Lions players not there, so he's sort of put faith in the guys that didn't go, more or less. But so I think the game plan will be similar and pretty conservative, because that's easy to rely on a forward who's a very experienced player just to manage the game for the first 50 minutes. But they've all played together, the England team. So, they might have been together recently, but they've all played together. So I don't lend much to that unless they're going to tactically change the game dramatically in a short space of time. Then they'll be compromised. But I think both teams will rely on recent performances, recent tactics, recent method to see how they go. And they'll get down to the basics. Is your scrum good enough? Is your line out going to be good enough? And I think that they'll all focus on getting those fundamentals right. And there's going to be a question of who can catch the high balls and who doesn't drop the passes.
Yeah.
So that'll be a close game.
So before I ask you who you think might win the match, one of the other themes that emerged this week was a discussion around, this developing hybrid players. Steve Borthwick talking about playing Ben Earl at 12 at some time, almost as if it's a certainty. Talking about Henry Pollock playing on the wing. Rassie Erasmus selecting Andre Esterhausen for the match against Japan as cover for the forwards as well as the backs. What's your thoughts about the evolving?
Old news, mate. Old news. I mean, when we're back in the Brumbies days, we had Radiki Samo playing back row and wing. No problem.
Yeah.
So
no, very true. So and Eddie Jones has been talking about Jack Noel.
If you've got the athlete, it's possible. And, Australia used Tizano at 12 there for half a test, and he didn't look out of place. Because it depends on your tactics. If you're just punching the ball up or doing fundamental things, then you're going to get away with it. So. Yeah. If you've got a guy that's fast, can catch and chase high balls, then it doesn't really matter. You put him on the wing. So in a pinch hit situation, and that's what's been going on. We've seen Australia's played the halfback on the wing a number of times. So it is drifting that way, but it does worry me in terms of the simplicity of the game plan. It all gets a bit dumbed down a bit to cater for the lack of specificity in the skills.
So who wins? Who wins on Saturday at Twickenham?
It probably depends on a forward. If he's kicking well, they'll try and build a scoreboard that way. And so the ruckle, the discipline around the ruckle will be important. I'd like to think it's going to be close and Australia can get over the line. They got there at the end last year. So I'd like to think that happens again, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was the other way around.
No, certainly looking forward to getting up and having a watch of that match in Twickenham on Saturday night or Sunday morning Australian time. From the Third Voice, Kent Lee says, appreciate your passion for and the promotion of rugby. Kent, no problem at all. Druxus on YouTube says, finally was able to catch up on episodes. Great shows. Love the ones in Japan. Great insight into Japanese rugby. So Druxus, no problem at all, and certainly enjoyed our time up in Tokyo, understanding about Japanese rugby. Charlotte Walsh, YouTube says, "G'day, love your work, lads. Go the Wallabies. These guys have been bench warm, trained as hard for months on end, and they are ready to go." DJ Robbo on Spotify says, "Love the pod. Listen every week from Toronto in Canada. A question, Ewen McKenzie, are there any overlooked Aussie players in Japan or Europe you think Joe Schmidt should consider for Wallabies selection?"
Well, I haven't done a tally, but I'm sure there are some players that could do that. I know what he's trying to do. He's trying to foster the local talent as much as he can. So, and I sort of support that approach. So it's very difficult to assess the form of players in different competitions that you're not seeing play. You don't know the total standard of the competition. So you can't just say, oh, because he's overseas, he's a better player than what's at home. So I think the focus on the domestic pathway is commendable as far as possible. So I don't know off the top of my head there's anyone that springs to mind, but I'm sure that could be, but you don't know enough about them because the competition they're playing is not representative of the same that they're playing back in Australia. So,
but it will be interesting to see now that the Ghetto law is no longer, because there are quite a number of Australian players up in Japan and certainly in Europe.
Yeah.
Josh Kemeny, who went to the
Kemeny is good. He's a good player.
2023 World Cup. I think he's at Northampton. So look, I'm sure there are plenty of players around.
Whether they're better players than when they left. I mean, if they're still improving players, or whether they're just players that are just plateaued. So that's what we don't know, and it's hard to see. But you can, it depends on the personality of the coach. I think other coaches, not Schmidt so much, but other coaches in the past have been quite keen to grab players from overseas. Schmidt's been reasonably restrained, in my opinion. So, and I think that's been a good thing.
Footy Hugo, Instagram, a direct message he sent through. I wonder if you guys could give me some detail on how popular rugby is in other countries. In Australia, we hear a lot about the strength of the game being overseas, but how popular is rugby actually in places like France, the UK, England, which is obviously part of the UK, Italy, Japan, compared to the popularity of NRL and AFL in Australia? Ewan.
Well, I don't know. I don't know statistically, but in France, for instance, you've got the football competition, the soccer comp, and then you've got the top 14. The sort of televised sport. So it's not a divided like it is in Australia when you've got league, AFL, football, and whatever else you can find. So it's not really a fair comparison. And the same in the UK. It's obviously very football centric. Touch of league, but I would say Union running its second there, but I don't know. And then obviously in Ireland and countries like that, it does pretty well because there's not a lot of teams, easy to support, but also their teams are successful. So that makes it easier to garner support. So
the thing I think about the game or rugby in France at the moment is that they have a very good television deal which gets them on free to air, and I think it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and it's not only the top 14, I think it's also D2, Division 2. So there is a lot of rugby that's available for people to watch. And some of the numbers that were in France for watching the Women's Rugby World Cup, in the multiple millions. So France, pretty strong. UK, clearly football is way ahead. But rugby has a niche and a strong niche. Italy, again, football mad. Rugby strong in the north, but not massively strong, I wouldn't have said. And Japan, Eddie Jones said the other day, baseball is by far and away the most popular sport in Japan, followed by Major League Soccer over there, or the J League, and then rugby follows in after that, but is growing as well. So in terms of comparing them to the NRL and the AFL, well, the NRL obviously is popular in New South Wales and Queensland, tiny little bit in Victoria. The AFL is strong domestically, but again, both of those are largely captured by Australia, a country of 27 million people, which again, I think is rugby's great opportunity once we do get organised and aligned, that we do have a significant advantage.
Yeah, I think they've also got historically
sports.
They've got strong media backing. They've had media ownership in rugby league, and so it's been self-fulfilling as well that some of the newspapers, some of the TV networks have supported their own product, and that's helped at different times. But now, what have you got now? Rugby league's got $800 million to spend a year. AFL's got 1.2 billion, and rugby union's got 1.25 million. Sorry, 125 million. So that that gives you a relative idea of where the sports sit in Australia.
So I wonder if you could also comment, Footy Hugo asks, on countries like Spain and Sri Lanka, which seem to get big crowds at local games, but we never hear about them. And that's certainly part of our mission here at Rugby Unity. Rugby Hugo is to talk much more about all of the rugby that's going on around the world. Any insights into Spain and Sri Lanka? I've got a couple.
Played a test in Spain, and that they've been growing. But Sri Lanka, it's interesting you say that. Back in my day, like 20 years ago, we were talking about setting up the under 80 kilo type, picking up from New Zealand competition. For basically a competition that's designed around for smaller bodies, but still playing 15-a-side game as opposed to the 7-a-side product. There's some key individuals in Australia who connected with Sri Lanka and have been trying to get something going there, but it's unfortunately it's a little bit isolated in that region. So it's a question of where it ties into. But if there's interest, we should be supporting it. If there's fan base interest, we should be supporting.
Earlier this year, I caught up with I think it was a New Zealand under 85 kilos playing against the Sri Lankan national team. Yeah. The match was, I think, in Colombo, and it was fantastic to watch. Very skillful, fast, tough. And I think the person you referred to there is Dilip Kumar, the former chairman of Australian rugby, and I think he's still at it. I didn't catch up. He was in Japan last week. I didn't get to catch up with him. He was up there receiving an award from the Japanese rugby for the work that he did in supporting Japan in their bid for the Rugby World Cup. But I think Dilip is still working hard on that project. I think there's something to that under 85s.
I said 80, but 85.
Appealing to watch.
I think you're right. That's a really good category, and it should be able to bring other parts of the world into a competition where they can be reasonably competitive straight away. I think it's definitely worth a look.
Particularly through Asia.
Yeah.
I think particularly through Asia, there's something to that, and perhaps we'll get Dilip on to talk about that at some point in time, because I do think that's interesting. And interestingly also, Spain, I know that they have moved to full-time contracts for a number of their players. The Spanish women's team competed at the most recent Rugby World Cup, so that was good to see there. And Spain obviously participating in the men's sevens. But also, Brett Robinson was telling me probably a couple of months ago now that the Spanish are very interested in bidding for the 2035 or 2039 Rugby World Cups. And I don't know, that sounds like to me a good place to go. I judge these things by the places I'd like to go to, and I think I've not been to Spain, but they would have all of the facilities, given all of the football facilities that they're there, and it's a big country. I think we will see Spain really come into it. They do play in the Rugby Europe Championship, which gets going in February of March of next year. So we'll get a read on just exactly how competitive they are at that sort of second tier in European rugby. So big thanks to everyone for the questions and the comments. And Hayden Creel also raises a point. He is from Finland, and he's talking about watching and getting access to the games and where he can watch international rugby, and can we have it in one place? Well, one of our questioners, or one of our commenters on YouTube, I won't give his full name, but let's call him Pleasant, on YouTube, he made the point that in the UK, to watch all of the rugby, so you've got to get Premier, TNT and Sky, it costs almost £100 a month to watch all of the rugby in the UK, in England. That's a lot. So again, this goes to this point around accessibility. If you have to cough up £100 a month, I would have thought for a lot of people that's in the cost of living crisis that we are in at the moment, it would be out of reach for many families in terms of their budget. So again, not having that opportunity to get the game to people. And again, I think the Women's Rugby World Cup in the UK was great. Its success was greatly enhanced by the fact that it was shown on the BBC, and it was free to air, and everyone could watch it, and a lot of people did. Millions and millions of people did. So something that I don't know if we're ever going to get away from it now. When you look at the trend in North American sports, the NBA have just done a deal where I think they've carved up sort of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, all sorts of different carriers are taking the sport. The NFL will do the same thing when they do their next round of broadcast rights. So I just don't know how you solve that problem as sports look to continue to raise money. And by segmenting, it's the way that they can make money. So anyway, just a reasonable insight there. So Ewen McKenzie, a couple of things before you go. Obviously, Japan and South Africa. Interestingly, when you did see the team announced, you said you sent an email to Eddie and myself saying respect. You clearly think, well, it's a very good side that Rassie Erasmus is named, and
yeah, it's pretty much
Japan are the boy with the wheelbarrow. The job's in front of them for Sunday.
Yeah, pretty much their best side. I maybe the tight end props about the only one I wouldn't have thought, and they've got a good bench still too. All the usuals to come into the game. So it's probably how we talked about the Australian team versus Japan and making 13 changes. I probably would have run a team that you'd probably play against England into that game. So I think that's what Rassie's doing, is picking his best side. You can always take them off early and then run into the next test that way. So, but it is a sign of respect. I think, and that's kudos to Eddie in Japan.
Yeah. My fear is that it was such a tough game last weekend for Japan. They're a young team having to back up, huge travel week to get there. They won't lack effort, but I just think South Africa, having been in London now,
they're going to
settled. They're going
to be tough to hold out.
There'll be a margin.
10 metres out, they'll just keep going until they score. And Japan will be, they'll be up to the tackling and that, but it's attritional. So in the end, I think that they'll prevail, South Africa, but I don't think it'll be glamorous, but I think it'll be effective.
Yeah.
And hopefully Japan gets their moments.
Yeah. How big a margin would you think?
I don't know. I think, if it can keep it within 20 points or something like that, it'd be great for Japan.
Oh, yeah, I think that'd be more than respectable.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. My waters are telling me that it mightn't be like that, and
it could be.
It could get away from them.
Maybe
anyway, we'll wait and see. Another great
you
game
pay
to
for
watch.
beating him in the World Cup.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. Don't worry about that. Rassie did mention that this week.
Well, there you go. Right.
In the lead into the game. But this fantastic jamboree of rugby is on. Scotland, USA. Your thoughts there? Eddie Jones was saying, there's a margin between, he played against USA recently in Scotland. That's.
I think there'll be a solid win. For Scotland, yeah.
And what about Ireland and New Zealand in
both teams have
in Chicago?
Both teams have picked pretty strong sides, so I think there's a lot of pride on lie there. New Zealand will want to demonstrate continuity to their fan base, and Ireland will want to be showing that they're still the force that they have been for the last period of time. So. They've still got some lines coming off the bench too, so it should be a really good game, that one. I can't pick it. I said All Blacks the other day. Now I look at the teams, could be all the way.
Yeah. Do you worry from an Ireland point of view that the Leinster team, which is in many ways strongly reflected in the selection of the Ireland team, haven't been performing
I think
particularly strongly?
They're competitive, but they're missing big game moments, but that's been happening over the last couple of years. So I don't know, and that's probably a differently coached team, and but clearly Ireland has a formula and it works, and there's a confidence. So you'd like to think that'll make a difference on the day. But that said, New Zealand's introduced some very good players. Carter on the wing. There's a couple of good guys come into the side. Roygaard at 9 makes a big difference to their team. So I think that I'm probably still leading the All Blacks.
Yeah. And a great occasion, Soldiers Field in Chicago. I think I have been there. It's about a 60,000 stadium. And it would be a great weekend for rugby in the USA. And this is all part of World Rugby's plans to try to play more of these top-line games in the USA, building towards 2031. So the North Americans can start to understand more about the appeal of our great game. So anyway, there are other matches. The Barbarians against the New Zealand 15. Munster is playing Argentina A. And in the Rugby Europe Trophy, Croatia versus Denmark and Sweden against Lithuania. So we'll be reporting on all the results when we come back to you on Monday. But please, thank you for all of your support, your ongoing support, your questions, your comments, and wherever you're engaging with us across our platform, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, whatever podcast, the social media, wherever it is, thank you very much for that support. And if you would like to give us a question or a comment to be answered, we would like to do that. So lots to look forward to this weekend, Ewen McKenzie. So make sure that you do get plenty of sleep. And you can get up and be fresh to watch the games in the middle of the night. But for the moment, people, please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.